That night seemed to be like any other. I had finished another exhausting day at the office and was eager to get home, where I imagined I would find Emily, my wife, perhaps cooking dinner or watching one of her favorite shows on TV. However, upon opening the door to our apartment, I was immediately struck by an unsettling silence. Something was wrong. I called for Emily, but there was no answer. I walked down the hallway, noticing a dim light coming from our room. Each step felt heavier than the last, and a dark foreboding began to grow inside me. When I finally pushed open the bedroom door, what I saw left me paralyzed. Emily was in bed, wrapped in another man's arms. The scene looked like a grotesque painting, a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. For a moment, everything around me went blurry, as if the world had lost focus. Emily turned around, her eyes widening when she saw me. She quickly freed herself from the man, pulling the sheet to cover her body. "James, I can explain," she began, her voice shaking, but I didn't want to hear it. My heart was crushed, my world crumbling before my eyes. "How can you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, overcome with pain. The man beside her hurriedly began to put on his clothes, muttering apologies before quickly leaving the room, leaving us alone. Emily stood up, trying to get closer to me, but I took a step back, unable to bear the closeness. "James, please let me explain," she begged, tears beginning to stream down her face. "I didn't want this to happen, but you need to understand." "Understand what, Emily? That you cheated on me? That you thought it was justified?" My voice was filled with resentment and disbelief. She sighed, running her hands through her hair, visibly nervous. "Yes, I cheated on you. But it was because I needed more, James. I needed more than you could give me. I wanted more comfort, more money, a better life. And you would never be able to give me that." His words were like stabs, each one deeper than the last. I stood there, feeling small, insignificant. So it was all about money? A life of luxury that I couldn't give you? She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. "Yes, James. I know it sounds horrible, but it's the truth. I fell in love with the idea of a life you could never give me." With those words, something inside me broke completely. I realized that the love I had for Emily would never be enough for her, and it devastated me. I left the room without saying anything else, just grabbing a backpack with some clothes before leaving the apartment. That night, as I walked aimlessly through the streets, I made a decision. I would start over. I would invest in myself, in my training and career. I knew it would be a hard road, but I was determined to prove to myself that I could be more than Emily believed. The following years were of intense work and dedication. I immersed myself in studies and technology, constantly seeking to improve myself. Every small success was a personal victory, proof that I could overcome adversity. And so, little by little, I started rebuilding my life, my identity. What began as an attempt to overcome Emily's betrayal turned into a journey of self-discovery and growth. I was determined to achieve success, not to prove something to her, but to prove to myself that I could do it. I sat in the leather chair in my new office, taking in the view of the city through the glass windows on the 38th floor. It was surreal to think about how my life had changed in the last few years. Like James Thompson, the man who had once been humiliated and betrayed was now the CEO of one of the largest technology companies in the country. The path to get here wasn't easy, but every sacrifice, every sleepless night, was worth it. It was then that Linda, my assistant, entered the room with a stack of resumes. "James, we have some interviews scheduled for today. The first candidate is already in the waiting room." "Great. Let's get started," I replied, trying to stay focused on the present. I was prepared for a typical day of interviews, but nothing could prepare me for what was about to happen. When I walked into the meeting room, there she was. Emily, my ex-wife, the woman who had destroyed my heart and my trust years ago. She was sitting, holding a resume in her hands, and looked nervous. He didn't recognize me right away, which gave me a few seconds to compose my emotions. "Good afternoon," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm James Thompson, CEO of this company. And you are?" Emily looked up, and when she met my eyes, she turned pale. James? I didn't know. Yes, I interrupted with a controlled smile. Let's get started. I see you're applying for the administrative assistant position. She hesitated before answering. Yes, I really need this job. I see. Let's talk about your qualifications then, I continued, almost relishing the irony of the situation. She started telling me about her work experiences, but I could barely concentrate on her words. My mind was flooded with memories of the past. The day I found her with another man in our apartment, her cruel words justifying infidelity by my inability to provide financially. It was a blow that devastated me, but also motivated me to achieve the success she thought I would never achieve. I ended the interview with formality, maintaining a professional facade. Very well, Emily. We'll be in touch. She left the room visibly shaken, and I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to see her suffer, wanted her to feel the same pain I had felt, but another part of me was just tired. It had been a long journey to get here, and I didn't know if I had the energy to relive all that suffering. Later, Linda entered again with a curious expression. Everything okay, James? You seem distant. Yeah, I'm fine. Just a little surprised by something, I replied, without going into detail. I spent the rest of the day thinking about the irony of fate. Emily, the woman who had once looked down on me for not being successful enough, was now desperate for a job at my company. Life has a funny way of putting us in unexpected situations. As night fell, I closed my laptop and stared at the illuminated city outside. I knew I had to make a decision about Emily's future at the company, and I couldn't let my emotions dictate my actions. But one thing was certain. I was no longer the weak, insecure man she had left behind. I was James Thompson, CEO, and I had the power to decide her fate. With these thoughts, I got up and left the office, prepared to face whatever came next. When Emily entered the meeting room, I was sitting at the head of the long glass table, reviewing some documents. The surprise on her face was evident. His eyes widened and his mouth formed a discreet "oh" in astonishment. I could see the hesitation in his steps, as if every movement toward me was a colossal effort. I kept my expression impassive, just gesturing for her to sit down. James, I had no idea, she started, but I interrupted her by raising my hand. Emily, we're here to discuss your application for the administrative assistant position. Let's stay focused on that, I said, my voice sounding colder than I expected. She swallowed hard, nodding. As I explained the responsibilities of the position, the seriousness of the situation seemed to finally dawn on her. I saw the internal struggle reflected in his eyes. Pride and the need for a job were fighting a silent battle. When I finished my explanation, she took a deep breath before speaking. I accept the job, he declared, his voice firm, but with a slight tremor that did not go unnoticed by me. Great, I replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. You'll start tomorrow. I hope you're up for the challenge. The next day, I watched her from my office as she familiarized herself with her new work environment. Emily, who once exuded confidence and aplomb, now seemed out of place, a shadow of the woman I knew. There was a certain satisfaction in seeing her like this, but at the same time, a feeling of nostalgia and pain began to emerge within me. I vividly remember the night I found her with another man in our apartment. The betrayal was a devastating blow, and his cruel justifications that I couldn't provide financially were even more hurtful. That night was the catalyst that shaped my future. I decided that I would prove to myself and to everyone that I was capable of much more. Now, seeing her there, under my direct supervision, a part of me wanted to show her how far I had come, while another part yearned for revenge. Emily, I need you to organize these files and deliver a complete report by the end of the day, I ordered, handing her a stack of documents. I saw the frustration in her eyes, but she just nodded and got to work immediately. The following days were a series of carefully planned humiliations. I tasked her with tedious, repetitive tasks and always found something to criticize. That's not good enough, he often said. You can do better than that, Emily. She never objected, but the tension on her face made it clear that she was struggling to maintain her composure. During a coffee break, I saw her sitting alone in the cafeteria, absent-mindedly scrolling through her cell phone. I walked over and sat in front of him without being invited. "James, I really need this job," she said suddenly, her voice low and urgent. "I know I made mistakes, but I'm willing to make amends. I just need a chance." "Emily, you're here because I decided to give you a chance," I replied coldly. "But that doesn't mean it will be easy. You'll have to prove yourself." She nodded, her eyes teary, but without letting the tears fall. There was something admirable about her determination, but I couldn't allow empathy to interfere with my plans. After all, my intention was to teach her a lesson, and I could not deviate from that goal. As she worked tirelessly, I began to remember the painful moments of our past, the memories of lonely nights, of doubts and insecurities. Every little success in my career was a way to exorcise these demons, but nothing seemed to be enough until that moment. When the clock ticked down to the end of the day, I called Emily into my office. She walked in cautiously, holding the report I had requested earlier. "It's here, James. I hope it meets your expectations," he said, handing me the document. I reviewed the report in silence, feeling his anxious gaze on me. Finally, I closed the file and looked directly into his eyes. "It's acceptable. You can go," he said simply. She nodded, visibly relieved, and left the room without another word. As the door closed behind her, I felt a mixture of triumph and emptiness. Revenge was underway, but the pain of the past still resonated in my heart. Over the past few weeks, Emily had worked hard to improve her work performance. Every task I assigned her seemed like a mountain to climb, but to my surprise, she never complained. I watched her closely, analyzing her every movement, every reaction. There was something almost pathetic about his desperate attempt to prove himself, to seek redemption for his past actions. One morning, while I was reviewing some reports in my office, I heard a timid knock on the door. "Come in," he said, without looking up from his papers. Emily entered, carrying a stack of documents. His eyes were tired, but there was a new determination in his face. "Here are the reports you asked for, James," she said, placing the stack on my desk. I looked at her, remembering the confident, self-assured woman she had once been. Now it looked like a shadow of its former self. I took the reports and started leafing through them, without paying much attention. "Do you think this is enough?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Do you think these reports will change anything?" She hesitated, but kept her gaze steady. "I'm doing my best, James. I just want a chance to show that I can be useful here." I gave a short, humorless laugh. "A chance? You already had your chance, and you threw it away." She swallowed hard, but didn't back down. "I know I made mistakes, but I'm trying to change them. I just need you to give me an opportunity." "Opportunity?" I repeated, leaning back in the chair. "You already have the opportunity to work here. Do you think this is not enough?" She didn't respond right away. Silence stretched between us, filled with unresolved tensions. Finally, she sighed. "No, I don't think so. I'm grateful for that. I just want to prove that I can do more, that I can be better." I watched her for a moment, pondering her words. There was something in his voice that suggested sincerity, but it was not easy to forget the past, the wounds that still bled. "Very good, Emily," he finally said. "Let's see what you can do. I have a new task for you." His eyes shone with a mixture of hope and fear. "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to prepare a detailed presentation about our new product line for a meeting with foreign investors. You have 2 days." Her eyes widened, surprised by the tight deadline. 2 days? That's very little time. "I know," I replied coldly, "but if you really want to prove yourself, this is your chance." She nodded, determined. "I'll do it." "Excellent. Now you can go." She left the room, and for a moment, I wondered if I was being fair. But the memory of his betrayal soon dispelled any doubts. She needed to understand the weight of her actions and how they had shaped me. The following days were intense for Emily. I saw her running around, reviewing data, preparing slides, consulting with colleagues. I couldn't help but notice the effort she was putting into the task. But even so, I decided to make things even more difficult. The day before the presentation, I asked her to redo part of the work, claiming that the data was out of date. She turned pale, but didn't protest. He worked late into the night. While I watched from afar, the tension evident in his movements. Finally, on the morning of the presentation, she handed me the materials. There were dark circles under his eyes, but also a new firmness in his features. "It's all here, James," she said, her voice steady despite her visible fatigue. "We'll see," I replied, picking up the presentation. During the meeting, Emily did surprisingly well. His presentation was clear, concise, and impressed investors. I didn't want to admit it, but she had exceeded my expectations. When the meeting ended, the investors were satisfied, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and frustration. At the end of the day, I called Emily into my office. She entered, looking exhausted but with a look of triumph in her eyes. "You did a good job today," he said, reluctant to praise. "Thank you, James," she replied, with a tired smile. Silence settled between us once again. There was a palpable tension, a mixture of unspoken feelings. "That doesn't change anything," he finally said. "I still have a lot to consider." She nodded, understanding. "I know, but thank you for giving me this chance." She left, and I was left alone with my thoughts. The revenge I had planned seemed less sweet now. What did I really want? Revenge or redemption? The lines were increasingly blurred, and I no longer knew where this would all lead us. I was in my office, absorbed in a pile of reports when I heard a soft knock on the door. "Come in," I said, without looking up from the documents. I knew who it was. Emily had been on my mind all day, and now she was there, ready for the confrontation we both knew was inevitable. She entered, hesitantly, but with a newfound determination shining in her eyes. "James, we need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. I raised my eyes to meet hers. "Say it, Emily," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. The tension in the air was palpable. "I know you hired me to teach me a lesson," she began, her voice shaking but steady. "And I understand why. I know I hurt you deeply, but I'm here now, asking for a chance to prove myself and redeem myself." I sat back in the chair, crossing my arms. "Why should I give you this chance, Emily? You had your opportunities before, and you chose to betray me." She took a deep breath, fighting to maintain her composure. "Yes, I was wrong. I made horrible choices and paid a high price for it. But since I started working here, I've tried hard to show that I'm capable, that I can truly contribute. I'm just asking for one last chance." I stared at her in silence for a moment, pondering her words. Part of me wanted to deny it, wanted to see her continue to suffer the consequences of her actions. But another part, perhaps more noble, recognized that we all deserve a chance at redemption. "Okay," I finally said. "I'm going to give you this last opportunity. There's a critical problem we need to solve at the company. If you can do it, I'll reconsider your position here." She nodded, visibly relieved. "Thank you, James. I promise I won't let you down." In the days that followed, I saw Emily dedicating herself intensely to the challenge. She worked long hours, often being the last to leave the office. Her commitment was undeniable, and little by little, I began to see the same determined and intelligent woman with whom I once fell in love. One particularly long night, I was reviewing some reports when I heard someone knocking on my door again. "Come in," he said, already knowing who it would be. Emily walked in, holding a stack of documents. "James, I think I managed to solve the problem," she said, with a gleam of pride in her eyes. "Show me," I replied, intrigued. She began to explain her solution, detailing each step she took to achieve the result. As she spoke, I couldn't help but be impressed by her skill and dedication. When she was done, I realized that she had truly found a viable and effective solution. "Emily," I began, choosing my words carefully, "I am truly amazed at what you have achieved. I admit that I underestimated you." She smiled, visibly moved. "Thank you, James. This means a lot to me." I sighed, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "You have proven yourself, Emily. I will reconsider your position in the company. But know that this does not erase what happened between us. Trust is something that is built over time." She nodded, with tears in her eyes. "I understand, James. And I promise I will work hard to earn back your trust, any way I can." That was a moment of change for both of them. Although the wounds of the past were still there was new hope that, perhaps, we could find a way forward. As I watched Emily leave my office, I couldn't help but reflect on how life can take unexpected turns. She had surprised me, and now, it was my turn to decide what to do with this new reality. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe there was a chance for healing for both of us. I found myself in my office, staring at my computer screen, but my mind was far away. The surprise of seeing Emily solve the critical problem I had given her left me perplexed. After everything she had done, how could she still be able to demonstrate such dedication and skill? I took a deep breath and decided it was time to reveal the truth behind his hiring and my true intentions. Emily, can you come to my office, please? I called over the intercom. A few minutes later, she appeared at the door, with a mixed expression of curiosity and apprehension. His eyes, which previously reflected arrogance and self-sufficiency, were now filled with humility and regret. "James, did you want to talk to me?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Yes, Emily." "Sit down, please," I replied, pointing to the chair in front of my desk. "I think it's time we have a serious conversation about what's going on here." She sat down, folding her hands in her lap, clearly nervous. I watched her for a moment before starting. "When you showed up here, desperate for a job, I recognized an opportunity. An opportunity to teach you a lesson, to make you feel some of what I felt years ago. And that's exactly why I hired you." Emily's eyes widened in shock, and she opened her mouth, but I held up my hand for her to wait. "You betrayed me, Emily. You destroyed our life together, you humiliated me, and all because you thought I could never provide for you financially. I spent years trying to overcome that, working harder than anyone could imagine to get to where I am today. But when you walked through that door, all those painful memories came flooding back." She lowered her head, tears beginning to stream down her face. "James, I didn't know. I'm really sorry. I was selfish and stupid. Nothing can justify what I did. You gave me more than I deserved. I betrayed you, and so I lost everything." I watched her for a moment, letting her words echo in the room. The apology seemed sincere, but what did that change now? "I wanted to make you understand how much your actions hurt me, Emily. And in a way, I think I did. But I also saw that you still have value, that you can still be dedicated and talented when you want to be." She lifted her head, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "James, please give me a chance. I know I screwed up, but maybe we can start over. I still love you, and I want to make things right this time." I sighed, feeling a mix of compassion and sadness. "Emily, I believe you truly regret it, and that's why I decided to tell you all of this today. But unfortunately, we both know that some things can't be undone. I've moved on with my life, and now I'm in a happy relationship with someone else." She seemed to crumble at my words, the hope fading from her eyes. "I understand. I deserve this. I just wanted one last chance to make you happy. Emily, you had your chance, and you wasted it. I hope this experience helps you grow and become a better person. You are capable of great things, but you need to learn to value the people around you." She stood up, wiping her tears, and with a determined look. "Thank you, James, for everything. I will never forget that lesson." I watched her leave my office, feeling a weight lifted from my shoulders. Finally, justice had been done. With my heart at peace, I knew I was ready to move forward, leaving the past behind and embracing a future full of possibilities.